Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Larson's Son in a 15 plus 2 game on leadchess.org. I'm opening with d4, and let's play the main line c4 after this. So, I haven't been posting lately. I'm getting ready for my trip to... Let's play knight f3 here just to mix it up. My trip to London, which I will be departing for on Monday, this Monday, December 5th. And black is playing b6. I think I'm going to play e3 here. This is a rather modest setup, but not without some venom. Just looking to develop the bishop to d3. So let's play that. This is similar to the Nimzo with e3, except that you haven't committed the knight to c3 yet. So we're avoiding black pinning us with bishop b4. So I've been getting ready for that trip. Also, I've been having some technical issues. I just played a bullet tournament here on Lead Chess, and I recorded it, but the recording is very choppy. And I'm not sure I'm going to post it because it was almost unwatchable. I was like cringing the entire time. So for whatever reason lately, my computer has been lagging very bad whenever I use my recording software. And it's especially noticeable when I'm playing faster games like Bullet. I guess because of the FPS or what. So I think for now I'm just going to play Blitz and Standard. Not like I have much time anyways before I leave, to avoid this issue. So knight e4, I think I want to preserve this bishop, so I'm actually going to play bishop back to e1. Don't really want to put my bishop there, though. It's a weird-looking move. Black can often try to support this knight with pawn to f5, so I'd like to play bishop e1 and then knight bd2, or even knight c3. Yeah, let's play bishop e1 with knight c3 in mind. So let's say black plays castles, and then knight c3, f5. I will go knight d2, or maybe queen c2 first. I'd like to evict this knight on e4, but it could take some maneuvering. So about those computer issues, if anyone has any ideas as to what I should do, I would be very grateful, because I've tried a number of different things. I've tried updating all my drivers for all my devices and every single piece of hardware on my computer. I've uninstalled and reinstalled my recording software, which is XSplit, very common piece of recording software. And nothing seems to be working. So I have no idea what the issue is. I'm emailing with XSplit support at the moment, so I hope when I come back from my trip, I might be able to narrow it down. But the fast videos, I don't know if I can make them right now, unfortunately. So d6, all right. So again, I could play knight c3 and just attack that knight. Could also maybe throw in a queen a4 check move, but I think knight c3 is probably the best move. Hope you guys enjoy the World Championship. Yesterday they had the tiebreak, and I watched the entire thing. I was so pumped up for it. That was the most fun I've had watching chess in a long time. The majority of the match, I would just check in on the games here and there. I wasn't following them actively in the time that they were being played necessarily, because it's very tough to follow 4, 5, 6, 7-hour games, or in the case of game 12, a 35-minute game. But the tiebreak was nonstop action, and it made for highly enjoyable chess viewing, in my opinion. Okay, so black castles. I've got these two bishops nicely arrayed. I could advance in the center with e4 and just grab space. That's my first instinct here. I could also play d5. d5 is very interesting to me because if black takes twice, I'll have bishop takes h7. So d5 may encourage black to play e5. I just wonder if there's some way I can try to profit from that. The light square bishop would be relatively shut out of the game, but aside from that, am I really doing much? I don't know. I have more space in the center and on the queen side, so naturally I'd like to use that, but it feels like now might be the time for a break, like d5. Like d5, e5, knight d2, maybe with f4 in mind. That's one plan that comes to mind. Or d5, e5, knight d2 with b4 in mind. I could start with queen c2. Just probe black on the king side, just see how he responds to that. Yeah, you know what? Queen c2 doesn't look so bad. I'm going to play that move. Threaten bishop takes h7. Watching Magnus's time management in his games with Karyakin was pretty inspiring, by the way. He kept the pressure on. Karyakin was constantly down on time in the tie breaks. Okay, so g6. Unfortunately, now that I put the queen on c2, I can't play d5 anymore unless I want to purely sacrifice a pawn. So that is a bit of a downside to my last move. But overall, I'm kind of happy that I've induced this g6 move. I wonder if black will play bishop takes f3 at some point. He very well might, but I don't know that I should spend much time worrying about that. Could play knight d2, and then after knight d7, maybe even go for f4. Looks interesting. Yeah, let's do that. Knight d2. So I'm really making a point to avoid the time pressure that I tend to get into in the middle game. And I know I say this constantly, but it really is something I'm working on. I could also play b4 here so as to meet c5 with a capture and then play b5. It's kind of interesting as well. Yeah, you know what? That might be the better way of going about it here. I'm going to do that. So slight change of plan. I still have f4 in mind, but I think I want more control over c5, anticipating that black may like to break with c5 as well. I bet Tony Rotella likes this guy's username quite a bit. Hello, Tony, if you're watching. He's a big fan of Bent Larson. Maybe this is Tony, actually, under his second account. Larson's son. Nah, I doubt it. Tony doesn't seem like the guy who'd use a second account. So black is laying back. He's adopted a formation with a bunch of pawns on the 6th rank. He's free of weaknesses. He does have a little less space than I do, though. So I suspect I'm slightly better here. But I know from experience in playing against this type of pawn structure that it's a tough nut to crack. And if white gets overextended, the defects in the position can easily be exposed. So he's thinking a bit. I think plausible moves for black are f5 or c5. Probably not e5. I don't think that's a break that black would like to make. Well, maybe, you never know. Plays bishop f6. Okay, so I think he's going to try to put the bishop on g7. I can still play f4 if I like. And maybe situate this knight back on f3. I could also try to play further on the queen side, maybe a4, a5. I wonder if bishop f6 is going to be connected to playing c5. Black could consider that, couldn't he? Yeah, that is possible. So if I play a4 and black goes c5, knight take, play b5. Black looks mighty solid there, though. I could play something prophylactic like rook fd1, but then again, if I'm going to play f4, I might want the rook on the f-file. So many plans in so little time. Bishop e4 is another move I'm considering, but it looks a little toothless. Let's play a4. I'm going to continue with the principled expansion move. Looking for a5, and then if possible a6, continue cramping black. Let's put him to the test and see if he wants to play c5. I haven't made up my mind what I'm going to do against c5, but I have some ideas in mind. One thing I'm thinking of, if c5, then moves like bishop e4, knight e4 gain in strength, specifically because d6 will be weaker. So say c5, bishop e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4. The fact that I'm on d6 immediately is kind of nice. And I'm also hitting f6. So let's throw the decision back at him and see if he wants to break. Or if he's just planning to play bishop g7. He might very well do that. What did you guys think of the World Championship, by the way? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was boring, as a lot of people thought it was, and were criticizing the players, especially after Game 12? That completely uneventful draw with Magnus playing the white pieces? I'd love to hear your opinions. I was pretty astounded that Karyakin even stayed in the match, honestly, because his white openings were complete. How shall I say this? They were completely ineffective. He didn't get hardly any advantages with white, with the exception of one Roy Lopez game in that very sharp line where Theory stretched to move 25 or 30 or so. I think that was game 10, I want to say. But yeah, aside from that, I really didn't think he got much. Okay, so black plays c5, striking at my center and also the queen side. But again, this d6 pawn may become weak as a result of this move. So two candidates here, this or this. I don't think I want to insert a capture first. So bishop e4, knight e4, those are the only moves I'm going to look at. You know, bishop e4 might be met by d5, though. Therefore, I think I'm going to go with knight e4. And I'm going to play it fast in the spirit of not wasting too much time. And he does go back to e7. Okay, so this makes me feel a lot better about taking this way now and opening the position a bit. So yeah, let's do this. Take on c5. Now I've got this nice dark square bishop. And he plays the symmetrical capture. Okay, so b5 would be the normal decision here. Just checking to see if there's any reason not to play that move. I don't think so. Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. I think black needs to fight me on this diagonal. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him play f5 here, drive away the knight, and then maybe play either knight f6 or bishop f6. And he does. Okay, so where to put this knight? I've got g3 and d2. On g3, the knight is kind of out of play, but the thing I don't like about d2 is that I'm aligned on the d file in a way that could hurt me. Bishop on d3, knight on d2. It's not going to matter yet, but in a couple more moves it could matter. But I still feel like d2 might be the way to go. Let's say knight d2, bishop f6, rook fd1, something along those lines. Rook ad1 maybe. Yeah, f5 is a good reply. Gotta give him credit for that. Let's play knight d2. Yeah, I'm going to go with this one. If I can get in a quick a5, a6 is always going to be annoying. So let's say he plays bishop f6 here, and I reply with a5. Then if he takes on c3, I take with my queen. He proposes a queen trade. I think I can take him up on that queen trade, and then quickly play a6 and try to shut out his bishop, regardless of which way he takes back. I'm a little worried about this alignment, again, with the bishop on d3 and knight on d2. I always got to worry about moves like knight e5. For the moment, I control e5, so it doesn't matter, but that's on my radar. Not too worried about a pawn storm from him. He has arrayed his pawns out somewhat aggressively on the king side, but I think my king is relatively safe. I don't foresee that being an issue. Maybe if he moves this dark square bishop somewhere like d6, I have to consider queen g5. I mean, I definitely have to consider queen g5 then as a resource for black, trying to attack g2. He plays bishop f6, though. Okay. So a5 would be consistent with what I was describing. Any reason not to do it? a5, knight e5. Any problem there? I think just bishop e2 is sufficient. Yeah, it should be okay. All right, show me what you got. Let's pre-move this capture just in case. And he immediately plays rook b8. So making way for the bishop to come here. Okay. Intriguing. All right. So I could keep the tension. I could push or I can take. I have half a mind to take here. I think taking might open the A file favorably, but maybe I can time that better. Maybe I can just wait for a move before I commit to that. Rook fd1 is a move that I mentioned earlier. It still comes to mind. Even playing a6, my pawn is so close to promotion in the endgame. That's also kind of a neat idea. Rook fd1. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go with Rook fd1. Sort of a non-committal move, but one that I hope is useful later on this file. And again, let's pre-move this capture. In such situations where your opponent is not taking a pawn that you've just advanced, and they do have the option of capturing it, the tension favors you, so you don't necessarily have to resolve the tension yet. I don't have to take on b6 or push yet, because it would probably be a mistake for black to take and mess up his structure. Okay, so he plays this, but I always have bishop f1 in this case, so that's why I wasn't too concerned about this idea, which I think is virtually forced in the current position. So yeah, let's do it. Bishop f1, be solid. If f4, I think I can just play e4. Although, I do have to watch out for f3, don't I? But his knight is loose on d7, so if f4, I wonder if I can just play a move like knight e4 or knight f3 and attack his queen. And then if bishop takes f3 or e4, rook takes d7, I'm threatening queen g7 mate. Okay, so this may come to pass. We'll see. Knight e4 is the move that springs to mind. Because if knight f3, I guess he has queen f6, doesn't he? Offering a queen trade. Whereas with knight e4, he has no queen f6, and my knight is protecting my queen. So that's a nice benefit to that move. Knight e4 is a nice little shot here, which I'm very tempted to go for. What if he just retreats, though? So knight e4, queen e7? What am I doing then? Maybe just f3, something like that. So I'm ruling out knight f3 due to queen f6, I think. Even that might be kind of interesting, though. But yeah, knight e4 seems more likely the best move. I could go knight e4, queen e7, rook takes d7, queen takes d7, knight f6 check. But I don't see that bringing me any advantage. Okay, so I think... Yeah, so I think I'm going to go knight e4, and if queen e7, knight d6. Either that or f3. I've got two moves in mind. I'm not completely sure which one, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to play knight e4 because it looks correct. There's a lot of decisions in these fast games that if I had more time, I would definitely spend the time on my clock to figure out. And he actually went for bishop takes e4. He took immediately. I'm pretty surprised by that. I've still got g2 covered, so he's not mating me, but I've got this threat now. Okay, and he plays e5. Things are getting sharp here. Well, So one threat I definitely have to be aware of is bishop takes g2, and f3, right? Like, for sure, that's something that needs to be on my radar. I can play f3 myself here. Oh, no, he just takes it, though, if I do that. So forget about that idea. I can take on f4. That was my first thought. And maybe I should play that. Yeah, let's go with the capture on f4. I know he can take with the queen, but I feel like this position will be easier for me to handle than the one where his f-pawn is just hanging over my head constantly. So let's see if he takes with... I was going to say queen or pawn, but he surprises me by taking with the rook. Go figure. Okay. Well, that makes me feel a little better, honestly. I don't know that I want to pause and take the a7 pawn. I think it's probably more prudent to do something like taking and then bringing this rook in and trying to deliver some checks. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. Let's take once. Not a lot of time to contemplate, so let's take once and then look to play rook a7 or definitely think about it. Notice how I've kept my pawns back? When you're trying to defend against an attack against your king, you have to be careful not to make too many pawn moves. I've talked about this before in videos. But one pawn is usually acceptable. If you start making multiple pawn moves, it's amazing how fast your king side can just dissipate. He plays rook f8. Wow. This is just an all-out assault. Okay, so my first thought is I can take with a rook and threaten checkmate in 3 with rook g7 to start. So that's the top of my candidate moves here. I mean, taking with a pawn is obviously very tempting because we get it so close to promotion, but he's right on me with rook takes f2. And if you get rook takes f2 in, he's threatening rook takes g2 with mate to follow. So I think I want to beat him to the punch. Yeah, and let's do this highly attractive move. Just checking if there's any tactics I'm missing, like weird stuff like queen takes g2, but I don't think so. So we've got rook g7, king h8, rook takes h7, king g8, and then rook a to g7 in mind. Checkmate. And the nice thing is if he guards g7 with his queen, so let's say queen here, I think I'm very happy to play that anyways and give up my 2 rooks for his queen because I win e5 with check after that. I've got the b pawn in my back pocket. It'll be easy to defend against his attack by just playing a move like f3, solving the problem of the hanging pawn on f2. So I'm confident I can hold, or more optimistically, just win there. This game sharpened up real quick. I wasn't expecting black to just go all out on the king side like he did. But maybe it's something I should have put more thought into. But again, I'm trying to be practical with that time usage. This is good training for me in my upcoming tournament. Even though I have a lot more time in these tournament games, 90 minutes or more. It's a standard tournament time control with a 30-second increment. You want to get in the habit of being ahead on the clock, or if not ahead, using your time responsibly and not constantly being in time pressure. So now he's thinking, but it might be too late. Definitely black can't consider trading both pairs of rooks. If he puts a rook on f7 and we just swap everything off, my b pawn is going to tell. So yeah, he resigned. Seems a little premature, but maybe not in view of this big threat. Black's just running out of gas here. So let's just tell him good game. Now, looking at this game for a second, before we head over to the analysis, just a few things I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at bishop e1. I'm curious what the computer thinks of that. It's an awkward looking move, but I don't want to forfeit my bishop here and just allow knight takes d2 in any old position, even though I have seen white play that way sometimes. So bishop e1 and then developing the knight to c3. Would have been interesting if he had played f5 and gone for a setup with the knight trying to be protected on e4, reinforced several times. Here I wasn't quite sure what the best move was. I was debating d5 if you'll recall, but I thought he would just play e5 in reply. I didn't think like I was getting anywhere. I think the position becomes critical roundabout here when he breaks with c5. And I go knight e4. And we open the position. All of these moves seem quite important. I liked his move f5. I thought that was the correct move because my knight is forced back to an undesirable square, either g3 or d2, and he can immediately oppose my dark square bishop. I've seen several Kramnik games. Kramnik is a player who I've studied in depth, and when I was learning knight f3 on move 1, I studied a ton of his games, and he often played structures like this from knight f3 on move 1, Nimzo-type structures where he was going a4, a5, and trying to squeeze his opponent on the queen side. Maybe I'm just a little faster here. a5 is annoying for black, and the threat is a6, which would force his bishop back to the awful c8 square. Rook fd1, I don't know. I don't know about this move. And he tried to outright prove that his attack was the stronger one here. But maybe he overlooked knight e4. Knight e4 came at a very convenient time for me. Undefended piece on d7. I think he strongly should have considered queen e7 here, supporting that knight, but he whipped my knight off on e4 in a flash, and then I played rook takes d7, and even after e5, it felt like white had the edge at this point. I don't know, though. The position is still pretty volatile, and there are threats for black. Bishop takes g2, bishop takes g2, f3, piling up on g2. So that compelled me to take. Maybe here he should take with the queen. Well, actually, pawn takes, as I was saying in the game, would be a pretty bad move, right? Queen g7 mate. So maybe queen takes is best, threatening the f-pawn. Although then I could probably play f3, or if I really needed to, queen e3 or queen g3. I feel like virtually every endgame should be better for white due to this pawn tension issue and the fact that a7 is hanging. I've already got a rook on the 7th rank black will have to deal with. So going to check out some middle game stuff, like what to do when black played c5, and also a couple things in the opening too. So let's click over to the analysis board. Okay, so stats for me: 1 inaccuracy, 0 mistakes, 0 blunders for an 18 average centi-pawn loss. Larson's son, 0 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 2 blunders for a 41 average centi-pawn loss. So let's just take a look here. I think this is an underrated move against the Queen's Indian defense, e3 on move 4. I've talked in the past about white's decision here, whether to play knight c3 or knight f3, or even g3. It's an important one. Mostly I played knight c3, but that does allow the Nimzo Indian, which is one of the highest quality openings for black in all of chess. And I've often tried to fight against this opening. Knight f3, on the other hand, hasn't been a major part of my repertoire on move 3, but I'm trying to change that up a little bit. I don't know if I'll be playing this in London if given the chance, but it's a move that I'd like to play more often. One thing about knight f3 is it does give black a few more options. So black can play d5 and enter a QGD, a Queen's Gambit declined, and in many cases it's not desirable for white's knight to be on f3, as in the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. Black can also play c5 here if he wants to try to enter a Benoni. b6, the Queen's Indian, is of course one of the very main theoretical roads here. And here too for white, white has a wide variety of moves. g3 and a3 are usually the moves that are connected with white's theoretical chances in this line. I played e3 though, so again trying to play in the style of a Nimzo with e3, but not committing the knight yet. So here I blocked with the bishop, but I could definitely consider knight bd2, as the computer's pointing out as well. I mean, I think it's kind of a matter of choice. I'm not going to consult the opening book just out of time concerns. I do have to run pretty soon. So bishop d2, the computer wants black to play c5 here instead of knight e4. Okay. I think there are a lot of situations where my piece is clustered on the d file can work against me, and this is maybe a good example of that here. So with c5, black is looking to trade the c pawn for the d pawn, and I can't fathom playing d5 here. Sometimes you can play d5, but I only have one defender on that square, and black has 3 attackers, and I don't think it would be a wise pawn sacrifice. So yeah, c5 makes sense. I think in hindsight, I should have considered knight bd2 more closely, for sure. So right here, I was wondering what to do. I played the slightly awkward looking move, bishop e1. The computer says knight c3 is better, but again, I didn't want to allow him the opportunity to snag the bishop pair. The upside of this is that it does speed up my development. I have all my minor pieces out and my rooks are connected. Computer's giving a small edge for white, but I think with the bishop pair and a structure that's free of weaknesses still, black should be fine here. So bishop e1, black plays d6. I was more so expecting f5 or just the immediate castles, but I don't think d6 can be that bad necessarily. So we're able to do this. f5 here is perhaps misplaced. Yeah, if f5, that's very instructive. d5 becomes possible. That's a move you often see when f5 is played. Since f5 weakens e6, white can try to play d5, attack the pawn on e6, and just as importantly, block out the bishop on b7. And we're not losing a pawn here, note, because let's say knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, pawn takes d5, black has g7 hanging in this exact position. So, yeah, that's a good indication why black shouldn't play f5 there. So he trades and then castles. Engine likes my queen c2 move. I was spending a little time figuring out what to do. I just thought d5 would run into e5. Didn't seem like I was gaining much from this transaction. The tactical point behind d5 here, by the way, the reason why I was considering it, if he takes twice, I have bishop takes h7. And after king takes h7, take on d5, and white is much, much better with black's king exposed. But instead, queen c2 and black plays g6. This is always a tough call. in situations where your h-pawn is attacked, whether you play h6 or g6. And you can make a case for either move. g6 blocks my queen-bishop battery, but given that I have this bishop poised on the a1, h8 diagonal, there are some concerns in the future. I see the computer likes h6 by a hair, but it's pretty close. Okay, yeah, and looks like the computer approves of this coming b4 idea. I didn't do it exactly in this position because I thought there was a chance black might insert bishop takes f3. That's a move I'm never sure in these structures whether I should allow or even worry about. So let's say I do play b4 and he goes ahead and takes on f3. I mean, am I just happy because I got the bishop pair even though I slightly damaged my king side? Probably. Looks a little easier to be white here. I can always play king h1 and hide my king. But in the interest of what I set out to do in this opening, which is avoid the Nimzo and avoid double pawns on c3, knight d2 fits the bill. So black goes knight d7, and here I do stake out territory b4. The computer wants black to play c5 right away here, as opposed to bishop f6. So if c5 had been played here, I'm pretty sure I would have played d takes c5, and then whichever way black takes, push b5, as in the game. But that brings up a good point. Compared to the game, black hasn't had to waste time playing bishop f6, then back to e7 when I played that knight e4 move, remember? And then after f5, going to f6 again. So he doesn't have to oscillate his bishop. He can just play bishop f6 directly, and maybe white doesn't have much here. It's a slim advantage or a non-existent advantage. I've got a bit more space on the queen side, but notice that I don't have a4, a5 in yet. a4, a5 in helps a lot. So, yeah, that's probably an improvement for black. Bishop f6 is a little slow, it seems. So I continue charging on the queen side. a4, c5. And this is the one move that the computer says was an inaccuracy for me. Knight e4. Which is funny because I felt very good about that move when I played it. It felt so natural to play the knight up to attack the pawn on d6 and also hit the bishop on f6. But nope, the computer says a5 is superior, just continuing with the pawn push and creating maximum tension. There's a lot of mutual pawn attacks here. But then again, it's not a very big advantage, so that leads me to believe that overall black's position is okay here. And maybe I'd have to look for an improvement earlier. So knight e4, and he plays the bishop back to e7. So best move is actually to take, huh? And give up the proud light square bishop. That surprises me. And then take on d4. Sacking the exchange. So if I take on a8, what's going on here? He takes c3, and the engine clearly prefers black, despite black being down 1 point of material. Knight e5, bishop e2. The c3 pawn is hard to eliminate. Yeah, and I guess c4 is weak. These pawns might be exposed as vulnerable. That's a cool line. It's an advanced exchange sacrifice there. I mean, I even don't have to take it, right? If he takes on d4, I could just take back with my pawn or my bishop, but maybe then black is playing rook c8 on the next move. Yeah, let's say e takes d4, rook c8. And Stockfish says black is completely fine, despite white having the bishop pair. Yeah, probably some tactics are preventing me from getting much here. This is already pretty complicated. Say I take this way, am I going to run into knight takes c5? No, e5, a counter break. And these pawns are fragile. That is one thing I was concerned about when I was pushing these pawns, because you got them all in the 4th rank, and I think I even mentioned this in the video, but it's not one-way traffic. Those pawns leave behind weak squares and weak pieces too, because they're not able to defend very many of white's minor pieces. So that's a cool line right there. Taking on e4, counterintuitive move. So you'd think black would want to keep this strong light square bishop, but maybe that's not the case. So bishop back to e7, and I open this diagonal, then play b5. Yeah, black plays f5. Here I wasn't sure where to put the knight. Computer says knight g3, but knight d2 is given the same eval. The knight just doesn't look very good on g3. This is another thing I've talked about in the past. Knights on g3, b3, b6, or g6 often get restricted by knight pawns. So, like this pawn on g6 stops me from being able to use the knight in a forward fashion here to the 5th rank. So I didn't really see a future for the knight on g3. It only seemed to me that could go backwards or maybe assist in some sort of e4 move or pressure against f5, but maybe the benefit of having the knight on g3 is that it helps protect my king a bit more. If ever he gets his queen to g5, there won't be an immediate mate threat. So knight d2, bishop f6, and I go ahead and charge with the a-pawn. And he played rook b8 very quick. Computer says it's okay, though. I like my position now, though. And rook fd1, okay. Well, there's some validation that the engine likes this move. I just didn't see an immediate benefit to releasing the tension, either with taking or playing a6. I wasn't sure yet which one I wanted. Because, like a6, for instance, it's very nice to have that pawn close to promotion, but I pretty much have to get at his a7 pawn if I ever want to make something of this queenside situation. And that's such a long ways off, and the battle is now going to shift to the center or the king side even. And again, if you notice a situation where it's clear your opponent does not want to take you, ask yourself if you can keep the tension. Because he's not going to change his mind and play b takes a5 unless he has a really good reason to, because that leaves a7 and c5 isolated. So rook fd1 was just trying to activate a piece on a file that I thought would likely be useful. So he takes, I take with the queen. Queen out to g5. I play the bishop back. Computer says he should just retreat here, queen e7. Instead, he plays f4, and that allows the knight e4 move. Yeah, okay. Loose piece on d7. And again, note that knight f3 with similar intentions, I think, is not quite as good due to queen f6, attacking my own queen. I don't have time to play rook takes d7. I was wondering about this line, though, and just trying to play this endgame. But knight e4 was so tough to pass up, and it just looks to be the better move. So knight e4, yeah, and he took, which, again, I don't know if he just thought it was forced or he didn't spend any time to look at alternatives. Because queen e7 is the move that I think is more challenging here. And I wasn't completely sure what to do against this because he's defending his knight on d7, and now my knight on e4 is on pre. I need to do something about that. And I don't think this flashy line is going to suffice. This doesn't lean anywhere. It's just a fancy trade, and he takes on e3 at the end. It's equal material. White doesn't look to have anything there. So I was thinking maybe knight d6. Try to attack his bishop on b7. That seems to be a good move. The computer is also saying the capture here is interesting. So if takes, take here, rook b6. Yeah, what if just rook a8? I don't think I would have gone for this. This looks highly unclear in my opinion. With that amount of time, yeah, I wouldn't have gone for this. I think I would have played knight d6 instead. But queen e7, probably the better defensive try. So after bishop takes e4, rook takes d7, I'm threatening the mate. He plays e5 to block it. And here, rook takes a7 would be, in theory, a great way to capitalize, but I thought I was in danger of running into bishop takes g2, bishop takes g2, f3 on the king side. But maybe I can insert a capture on f4, is that the point? So the computer thinks I have time to do this. And after bishop takes here, yeah, so not this, after which I'm busted, but instead inserting that capture, in-between move. Yeah, that's kind of tough to see, though, with limited time on the clock. That's a nifty one, though. So now if he takes this way with the pawn, we have queen g7 mate. The diagonal has been opened. And a capture with a piece like rook or queen just allows me to play bishop takes, and even though he can win f2 here, we safely get our king over. And there's nothing for black. White just wins. So it looks like I could white knuckle it with rook takes a7, but it felt much more natural to play a takes b6, or first this capture, I'm sorry, the take on f4, and then a takes b6 to follow. Yeah, and rook takes f4 is losing, according to the computer. His only chance was queen takes f4, attacking the f-pawn, but after f3 hitting the bishop, white retains a large advantage. Yeah, I think so, because black's pawns are pretty loose. My king is now safe. Queen's doing a good job of defending laterally, eyeing e5 too. Just look at a sample continuation here. Rook d6. I guess I'm not threatening to take his bishop yet because of queen f2 followed by queen takes f1. But my play on the queen side should be crashing through, shouldn't it? Maybe after some defensive moves. This still could have been complicated, though, if queen takes f4. Instead, rook takes, and it looks like I'm just getting there faster than he is. Now there's no bishop takes g2 stuff that I have to overly concern myself with. Like, if he goes for this now, and then rook over here, I can just play my queen over to help. Like queen f3 or queen h3, maybe. Apparently, I can even ignore it and allow him to do this. Those pawns are now quite strong. So if he had captured, I was going to invade with this rook. And I thought this was basically winning. Yeah, 2 rooks on the 7th is too much. So instead he played rook fb8, but I think after this next move it basically is over. Interestingly, even stronger is queen h3 according to the computer. Now it changed its mind. Rook takes a7 again. And just to illustrate that mate threat, so let's say black plays some aggressive move here. We have a common mating pattern. Rook g7, king h8, rook takes h7, king g8, and the other rook coming over, delivering checkmate with the f8 square taken away. So black just gave up. He didn't see a good way to continue without either trading all the pieces or trading like a queen for 2 rooks, as in the case of something like this. I think I would have just gone for, yeah, like rook g7, take all this, take his pawn on e5 with check, then play f3 at the end, and I think with c5 also being loose, it's over. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that game. I think I managed to win in a style that I often like to win with. Slow build up, using our positional advantages. And there are a few interesting tactical moments too. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and like I said, if you have any, this is just kind of a shot in the dark, but if you have any feedback about my computer/XSplit situation, I'd love to hear it. I have Windows 10. I updated to Windows 10 a little while back, and I suspect that might have created some problems, but I really don't know what the issue is at this point. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Thanks again for watching.